Hey everyone, Catch 'em All Collectibles here. In today's video, I will be again talking about the CGC update to their grading scale, slabs, and all that. I will do a quick overview of what the changes were, and I will discuss my thoughts on the market impact. I will discuss what I wish the changes were. And yeah, last week I talked about them live, nearly 3 hours. If you want the full in-depth live reaction, taking Q&A, this is going to be just more of a digestible short form video to cover some of the same topics. So feel free to time travel in the comments with the timestamps below. But here we go. So new Instagram post. At the time I did the live stream, this was not yet generated. So under the former scale on the right, you actually can't see where it says former scale, but the pristine and perfect grades now form the one pristine 10 grade. So the perfect 10 is retired as it shows. And yeah, 2 grades falling into 1 under a new labeling. One thing a lot of us thought this announcement may have been was just a new branding, new labeling for the highest grade. We kind of got that. Although we removed the highest grade, the perfect 10, the moonshot scenario, getting all 410 subgrades, that is no longer a thing. Subgrades are no longer a thing. But Pristine 10 is the highest grade with new branding, new label. Gem Mint 10s. So Gem Mint 9.5s. If you have any Gem Mint 9.5s with a blue label, regardless of subgrades, regardless if it had subgrades, anything that was a Gem Mint card with a CGC blue label is now a Gem Mint card with the new CGC label. However, the number changes from a 9.5 to a 10. Higher number, bigger money is essentially what the idea is behind that. And honestly, I think that will work. I'm not saying go out and buy any 9.5 at any price and that will guarantee you to make more money. I think a lot of people are falling into a trap of buying 9.5s at inflated prices from where they used to be, because fundamentally, the 9.5 is now the 10. The Gem Mint is now the Gem Mint. Nothing has changed from what they've stated. We will have to keep an eye on Pokemetrics over the next several months. We will have to keep an eye on the 10 rates, the Gem Mint rates that they assign as they continue to grade more cards. But yeah, functionally, the grades as they are claiming are the same. Perfect 10 was absorbed into the Pristine 10. 9.5 is being transitioned into a 10, still called Gem Mint. And then there is a little bit more ambiguity. There's a little bit more unknown. They claim that a quad Mint plus 9 now becomes a 9.5. One thing, this is where we're going to first start to address what I wish they did. What I wish they did is doing away with half grades. There was about an hour or two time period where the morning of the announcement, I thought that was the case. And I went through a roller coaster of emotions for this robot to go through the day of the announcement. And when I found out that the 9.5 is being turned into a 10, only so that they could create this new 9.5 Mint Plus grade, what are we doing here, CGC? In my opinion, half grades have merit and half grades have application in sports cards, vintage sports cards, where most of the cards are decades and decades old. Print quality back then wasn't as high. We're talking about TCGs here, at least on my channel. TCGs, CCGs. We're talking about the oldest cards being often 20 or 30 years old. Even many of those were printed in such quantity. They're being opened in high quantity today. Mint and Gem Mint out of packs. We don't need or want, in my opinion, at least I don't, half grades. What I wish CGC had done, because as they say at the bottom of this graphic, all other grades are the same. 9s are 9s, 8.5s are 8.5s, 7.5s are 7.5s, 5s are 5s. Give me a 1 through 10 scale with no half grades. That is what I want. PSA shows, and PSA largely is a 1 through 10 scale without half grades. A 9.5 does not exist. 1.5s all the way up through 8.5s do exist, but they barely use them. I'll show you that quickly in a little bit on Pokemetrics. But give us the PSA 10 scale, 1 through 10, whole grades only. That's functionally what PSA is doing, although half grades do technically exist. BGS, though, has a moonshot black label perfect card example. We know it's not perfect. CGC used to call those perfect. Even CGC perfect cards were not perfect in every way. Every card has some amount of flaws, microscopic or whatever they may be. But anyways, if I could go back, if I could make CGC go back and change their announcement, given how vast and given how big they went with it, I wish they went even bigger. Round every half grade up. Big numbers, big money, big happy customers, big happy collectors. Turn every half grade. 5.5s are now 6s. 7.5s are now 8s. One, I don't believe, and this is not a slight against CGC, this is a slight against humans, this is a slight against all grading card companies. I do not believe in the validity of something like a 5.5 grade at CGC, nor PSA, nor BGS. I do not believe in the repeatability of that measurement. If a measurement is not repeatable, it is not valid, it is not legitimate. There are certain cards where they kind of lay in between a 9 and a 10, and that's where CGC, that's where not PSA, that's where BGS or CGC would say, that's why the 9.5 exists. In my opinion, it should either be a 9 or a 10. It should either be an 8 or a 9. It should not be a middle grade. I don't think that they have the resolving power. I don't believe they have the repeatability to actually slot cards into 20 buckets or 30 buckets. Back when they had subgrades, they were slotting cards into hundreds of buckets with all the variations you could have between all grades with all subgrade variants. So give me 10 buckets, put my card as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. I think that they will be accurate enough and repeatable enough to where that is a reasonable thing that they could do and should do, in my opinion. PSA is essentially doing it, and if CGC cares to, I think that given their history having a perfect 10, in my opinion, they should have done a 1 through 10, taking from PSA, but also borrowing from BGS, having that perfect 10 grade. One thing that I think CGC really dropped the ball on. So we all know, we've all graded collectively, we've graded 2.5 million cards through CGC. Perfect 10s have existed in the past. Perfect 10s were always the gold medal, top of the mountain. That's one great thing PSA has with the Gem Mint 10. That is the summit. That is the peak. In PSA's world, 10 out of 10 is a perfect grade. You cannot achieve higher at PSA. Logan Paul said it in his Illustrator video. He had a perfect 10 out of 10 card. That is one big branding thing. 42% of PSA's customers submitting Pokemon cards get a perfect 10 out of 10 grade. One thing that dilutes the value is that so many achieve it, whereas at CGC, the perfect 10 was very hard to achieve. About 0.6, 0.7% achieved it. And at BGS, I don't know the exact data. Their pop report is very hard to parse out, and Pokemetrics doesn't track it. But BGS, the black label, is also very hard to achieve relative to something like a PSA 10 Gem Mint. But anyways, in my opinion, CGC should have opted for a 1 through 10 scale with a perfect 10 variant. I think the branding of the new 10 out of 10, pristine, top of the summit, absolute best grade you can get at CGC is very overshadowed by the fact that there used to be a higher one. So even though that there's some dilution because there's 2 10 variants. So the Pristine 10 is kind of diluted by the fact that you'll see a lot of other 10s on the market. One thing that does make it stand out is the black label, the black branding with the gold letters, kind of like BGS does. So they did borrow there. But one thing that I worry a little bit, market perception, the perfect 10s used to exist. The perfect 10s that people aren't sending back in, why would you send them back in to downgrade to a Pristine? Those still exist. So anytime you get a Pristine 10, anytime you get that nice fancy label, in your mind somewhere, you know that it could have been better. You know that it could have been better if you graded it before with CGC. At PSA, for 30 years, 10 out of 10 is the best. That is a literally perfect card as far as PSA is concerned. So the branding, in my opinion, is damaged of CGC's highest grade by the fact that they used to have one that was higher. So in my opinion, the Pristine 10 will never, and perfect 10s had not been competing with black labels for the absurd premiums that some of those go for. And I think that will only be exacerbated by the fact that CGC has taken away that moonshot opportunity at getting an exclusive like top 0.5 percentile card. So that's my little rant on what I wish CGC had done compared to what they had done. Let's go to the next thing here. Get it centered. So really quick overview. I kind of covered most of it. New labels. Here's what the new labels look like. We did see the quick little snapshot of like the Pristine 10 grade alone. This is what a Gem Mint card will look like. Branding, again, being damaged. Look at their nice blue labels. Nice blue labels that some people hated. Video games, comic books, Now the cards don't match anymore. The label thing wasn't big to me. The subgrade thing wasn't big to me. I didn't really care about either. I wasn't really utilizing the subgrades at all because they were so expensive. And I wasn't really caring. I mean, blue label's not my absolute favorite. The red label at PSA is not my favorite. They're all fine. I collect and value the cards, not so much the plastic. But yeah, I feel like they did a lot of things in this update, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope the market doesn't agree in a lot of respects. But the most premium grade, the perfect grade, not any longer called perfect. I think that just hurts the branding. And then the fact that people that do enjoy them, I mean, this is on their own website, and look how these kind of stand out. They don't blend in, they don't really match, and they don't align with the branding CGC has with their video games and comic books. So continuing on, the half grade still existing, kind of a crazy thing. Overall, I think the new label is fine. I don't think it's necessarily better or worse. It's just different than the blue label. It's different than PSA's red label. I think they're all fine enough. But yeah, that's what we've got. You can reholder up for up through September, I believe it is. $5 per card through September 30th, 2023. If you have a 9.5 and want to get the new Gem Mint 10 instead of a Gem Mint 9.5, and I believe you can do the same if you have a Pristine 10 wanting to go from the blue label to this new gold black label. So yeah, there's a little bit there. Let me dive in. So let me go back to this view. Let me go to Pokemetrics. So a little bit what I was touching on earlier. PSA, so shout out Pokemetrics. This is a website. I do pay like $3 a month, I believe, for what is called Pokemetrics EX. It gives you additional access. It gives you access to not only PSA's pop report, but CGC's pop report as well. And I have both of these here. So what we're looking at is not a subset of data. We are looking at the entire set of data from PSA, the entire set of data from CGC on Pokemon cards. So not Yu-Gi-Oh, not Magic, not sports, just Pokemon cards. So PSA, as of the time this data was pulled, which was yesterday, I believe. I'm recording this on June 22nd. PSA has graded 8 million cards, just over 8 million cards. As I mentioned, out of the 8 million cards that have been submitted, Pokemon cards submitted in the history of PSA, 3.3 million of those submissions, 41.55%, have resulted in a perfect 10 out of 10 grade. You cannot achieve higher than a PSA 10. So 42% of the time a Pokemon card has been submitted, that has left the submitter, that has left the end consumer feeling very, very good. There are concerns. There are certain cards where the PSA 10 gem rate on some Japanese, especially some ultra modern, we'll look at one card in particular, the 001 SVP promo that many people are probably familiar with, the Scarlet and Violet pre-order promo from Japan. Cards like that, the PSA 10 rate is nearing 80, 90, 95% on some of these cards. So at PSA, if you want to get granular enough to be able to distinguish a top 10% 001 SVP, you can't inherently, because the PSA scale grades too easily to where the top 90% of cards are clumped in together. That is one pro of having a more granular scale at the top end. That is one pro of having a bifurcated 10 grade where there is a Pristine 10 and a Gem Mint 10. At BGS, I believe they call them a BGS 10 Pristine and then a BGS 10 Black Label Pristine when all four subgrades are 10. So the additional granularity you get at the top end, whether or not you actually believe in it, whether or not you believe in the reproducibility, whether or not you believe they have the resolving power to consistently pick those out and grade those with consistency and validity and accuracy. That's a different conversation. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of cards do get lumped in on the very high end of PSA, and it's just not obtainable to be able to, for certain WotC cards, for certain mid-era cards, there are PSA 10 rates in the single digits. You can get a top 5 percentile card if you're getting a card that only has a 5% 10 rate, right? By getting a PSA 10. So a little bit of pros and cons to both examples. And I think truly the market likes big numbers. I think truly the market values just having 10s. PSA is in a good spot because it pleases a lot of people. 42% of people who have submitted have those 10s. If you're working in vintage, if you're working in mid-era, I know that it's nowhere near 42% for those cards, but still, the logic holds. And if you look card to card, which you can do on Pokemetrics, I'm looking at every set, every card. You can go set by set, and you can actually look at WotC, Neogenesis, Slowkings solely, and you can compare what the CGC 10 rate versus the PSA 10 rate. You can do all that. That data is all there. But yeah, overall, I mentioned earlier too, PSA is not using their half grades. Only 0.21% of cards are PSA 8.5. Only 0.01% of cards are PSA 7.5. Why doesn't PSA just drop the half grades? I mean, they're leading the industry by nearly 10 times over their second closest competitor. So they don't really have the need to change. But just outside looking in, doing market research, if CGC were reevaluating their whole scale, which clearly they did, why wouldn't they look at the industry leader? Why wouldn't they look at PSA and just say, let's just drop all half grades. Let's do 1 to 10, drop all half grades. We've already branded ourselves with the premium 10. I think CGC would have had a very hard time stepping away entirely from the premium 10, the pristine 10, or the perfect 10, because they had both. I think they would have had a hard time going solely 1 to 10 with no premium 10. But yeah, in my opinion, 1 through 10 with a premium 10, wherein the premium 10 for branding purposes was still called a perfect 10. They used to have these two. Why didn't they envelop the pristine 10s into the perfect 10s, call them all perfects, round all the Gem Mint 9.5s up to a 10, call them Gem Mint 10s, round up all the 8.5s to a 9s. They create this new 9.5 abomination called a Mint Plus. It's kind of funny looking at this too. 10s roll into the 10s, 9.5s roll into the 10s, 9s roll into the 9s. 9.5s just appear out of nowhere. They did loosely talk about in the live stream on Tuesday or Wednesday, they loosely talked about how a quad Mint 9 Plus, a lot of 9s don't even have subgrades, so it's like, who's going to evaluate whether it's a quad 9 Plus or not? Those ones apparently will slot into the 9.5. And then presumably, a quad 8.5 Plus would slot into a 9, although they're claiming here all the other grades at the bottom remain the same. So does a quad 9 Plus actually slot into a Gem Mint 9 or a Mint Plus 9.5? Does a quad 8.5 Plus slot into a 9? There's kind of some uncertainty around this, and I think a lot of this could have just been avoided. Doing away with half grades. Who wants them? Who collects 7.5s? Who collects 8.5s? These cards are produced in such high quantity, in such high quality. At PSA, 75% of all Pokemon cards graded are either 9s or 10s. Why are we grading them with 3.5s? Why are we grading them with 4.5s? There are only a small handful of cards that have semi-fleshed out values between 1 and 10. There are no cards in Pokemon that have fleshed out values. There are no cards that have high enough pops in 2.5s and 3.5s and 5.5s to have those values fleshed out. I do appreciate and understand that some sports cards may have it, but I don't think Pokemon will ever get there. I could be wrong there. I mean, let me know in the comments below if you have any pushback, if you have any other takes on any of these. Let me know. I would love to have a conversation about it. But yeah, so CGC, one interesting thing that I've talked about in my live stream and I'll continue to talk about. PSA grades 42% of all Pokemon cards as a PSA 10. CGC, if you were to do what I said and to roll the perfects and the pristines together, that would only encompass 4.78% of all Pokemon cards graded. So if you were to call the two of these together a CGC perfect 10, that would be less than 1 out of 20 Pokemon cards getting that. That would be probably a higher rate than BGS gives Black Labels overall. But in my opinion, big numbers, big money. People like it. It would still be a significantly harder to get 10, Gem Mint 10. Not the perfect 10, but it would be, if you look at overall, and again, we'll look at it on a card-by-card basis for 2 different cards. But CGC in the future, CGC starting next month, will call the 9.5 a Gem Mint 10. They're currently calling it a Gem Mint 9.5, but it will be a Gem Mint 10. Only 20% of cards get that. Only 25% of cards get that or higher. Whereas at PSA, that number is 42% getting the 10. So CGC grades harder. Card by card, if anyone lets me know in the comments below, I look through dozens of different examples. I do not think there is a single card where PSA gives out less 10s. Where PSA gives out less 10s, a lower percentage of 10s than CGC gives to 9.5s and higher. If anyone knows of an example, let me know. And one thing that I do when I pick out two cards to choose, it's not fair to look at certain cards where you're comparing apples and oranges. If you're looking at a WotC card where PSA is worth more, so more people have historically submitted, PSA's been around longer, more people submit to PSA because they have more value, more people submit to PSA because they have more volume. So if I try to compare a Neo Genesis Slowking, the PSA Pop Report versus the CGC Pop Report, it's not apples to apples. Because historically speaking, I actually have one on consignment that's going to the eBay vault soon. Very, very low pop card. Very, very hard card to grade in PSA Gem Mint 10. But over the years, it is not apples to apples what Slowkings have gone to PSA versus what Slowkings have gone to CGC. The only cards that we can look at that we are quite confident would have an apples to apples comparison. I'm just switching screens here for a second so I can show you. So the first card I'm going to look at, they need to have high grading quantity. They need to have two features. They need to have a very high grading quantity, a very high pop, so that we know we're working with a large data set. They also need to have an apples to apples. If I have one of these and I think it has a shot at a 10, I'm sending to PSA because this is a very low pop, very high value card. If I have a card in such mass quantity that I'm literally chucking them to PSA and BGS and CGC, and I'm not caring, I'm not looking at like the centering, I'm not looking at the quality. These things are just in such high quantity, I'm sending them to every company just to diversify my offerings. That's something I do with some cards. One of the cards that really stands out that I always talk about, Charizard Classic Collection from Celebrations. So this is this card. This is fresh data from about 2 days ago. So the PSA 10 rate of the Classic Collection Charizard is 66%, as you can see. 66% get 10s, 31% get 9s, and 2.5% get 8s. At CGC, only 0.66 have gotten the perfect 10. At BGS, 0.6%, slightly harder, have gotten the it's called 10 perfect here. It's the black label 10 at BGS. So as I was saying earlier, if you total up CGC 9.5, 41.6%, plus CGC 10, plus CGC 10 perfect, that is only 48.1%, which is vastly lower than the PSA 10 rate alone. So this is apples to apples. I have submitted over 100 to PSA. I've submitted about 50 to CGC. I've submitted about 30 to BGS. I have submitted, like, this card is available in such high quantity, in such high quality. This card is very modern. This card has been pack pulled recently. If we look at base unlimited Charizard, they would be submitted in mass quantity to all three, but the varying amounts of attrition over the years, we just can't know that it's been a one-to-one comparison, an apples-to-apples comparison. So that is why I chose the Charizard from Classic Collection, and that is also why I chose the 001 SVP Pikachu promo. And again, 90% 10 rate at PSA. If you add up CGC 9.5 plus CGC 10 plus CGC 10 perfect, it is close, 85.92%. CGC grades harder than PSA, generally speaking. A lot of people get their feelings hurt when I say that. A lot of people say not every CGC 9.5 is going to be a PSA 10. I agree. However, anyone who's handled any amount of PSA 10s, if you've handled 10 PSA 10s, you've probably seen one that is borderline, if not undeserving of the PSA 10. So when somebody tells me that not all CGC 9.5s would turn into PSA 10s, I would agree. And I would push back with not all PSA 10s would regrade as PSA 10s. This gets back to earlier resolving power. Why do we have so many buckets if they don't have the ability to actually parse them out and consistently and repeatedly put them into the same buckets? I do not believe in any of these companies having the resolving power to itemize each individual card into 50 or 100 different buckets with subgrades. So I believe in them more in their ability to do it into 10 buckets, 1 through 10, maybe 11 buckets, adding the 11th bucket for a premium 10. At CGC, if they were to like take my suggestion and if they were to do a perfect 10, that would be a very high perfect 10 rate for the 001 SVP. That would be like 58%. But at PSA, perfect 10 out of 10, they're doing it for 90% of the time. So I think you'd not get the black label premium, but you'd also get something that was more of like, at least this is a top 50 percentile 10 rate. Whereas the new Gem Mint 10 would be an additional 27%. Going back to the Celebrations Charizard, you'd have a scenario where this would be more reasonable because this card's a fair bit tougher to grade. You would have a perfect 10 rate on the Celebrations Charizard of about 6.5%, and then you would have a Gem Mint 10 rate of about 40%, significantly more difficult than the PSA 10 rate of 66%. These are all just my thoughts. These are all my own one person's considerations. Overall, as I mentioned in my live stream, I think even though a lot of us don't seem to like it, I think generally this is what the market wants. Big number, bigger money. I think it's as simple as that. CGC used to give out only about 4.8% of cards getting a 10 grade on the label. Now, assuming all else stays equal, they will give out 4 times that rate. They will give out approximately 25% of cards having either the premium Pristine 10 that I think the branding was hurt on by no longer calling it perfect, and the Gem Mint 10 together. So if anyone says CGC's grading too easy, if anyone says this is just a cash grab, money, whatever you want to call it, CGC is still grading harder than PSA. Show me a card where CGC is not grading harder than PSA, and then we can start to have a conversation. The CGC 9.5 Gem Mint rate plus the CGC 10 rate, the new CGC 10 Gem Mint rate plus the CGC 10 Pristine rate is almost universally lower than the PSA 10 rate. And I stand by that. That does not mean that every CGC 9.5 will become a PSA 10, but not every PSA 10 will become a PSA 10 if you were to crack them out. Not every black label would regrade to a black label. That's just the fundamental issue with the repeatability of these measurements that these grading companies are making. And in my opinion, as far as like where the values will go, how will the values be affected? I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people are overpaying for current 9.5s, thinking that magically, because the number goes to a 10, I think they're thinking that magically, instead of getting a top 20th percentile card or 25th percentile card, I think since the old CGC 10 was a top 5 percentile card, they think they're magically getting that. But if you buy the 9.5, pay $5 to reholder it into a 10, it's still a top 25th percentile card, not a top 5 percentile card. That said, if you overall, and I'm not advocating for all CGC cards should go up in value, but relative to PSA, so I do have these on screen. You can see them right here. So the PSA 10 value for a Celebrations Charizard is $220, whereas the CGC 10 Pristine value is $220. And the disconnect between how easy those are to grade. So the CGC 10 is 10 times harder to grade, yet the markets value them the same amount. In my opinion, it's kind of crazy. You could say that the PSA 1 is overvalued and the price needs to come down, or you could say that the CGC 10 one is undervalued and the price needs to go up. You could also say they're both undervalued or they're both overvalued and the prices just need to adjust at different amounts. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're selling for the same price, wherein one is actually 10 times harder to achieve. And again, I would vouch for this being an apples to apples comparison. Same thing with the 001 SVP. Twice as hard to achieve, yet the CGC 10 is selling for 50 and the PSA 10 is selling for 60. I think this is indicative that we live in a market where people buy labels. People buy plastic. They do not buy cards. They do not buy card quality. That is not an epiphany to me. That is not new information to me. I think that someday the market might come around, and maybe it takes decades, but I think the market will become more sane with the premium that it puts on plastic. I think almost universally, anyone who's followed me, anyone who knows my name, my branding, I kind of feel like plastic is almost universally overvalued in a lot of ways. And I think diving into the data of how hard CGC grades, people are not buying the cards. People are valuing the label, the branding of PSA, and they're overlooking oftentimes the actual card within. That's just one person's thoughts. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. 30 minutes. I mean, I I shortened a 3-hour live stream down by only 85%. I knocked off 5-6 of it, I guess. So I did not think this was going to go 30 minutes. I apologize for anyone looking for like a 10 to 12 minute YouTube pleasing video. But yeah, this is more of the Dan standard 30-minute video out of what could have been and should have been a 10-minute video. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. As always, I appreciate you all watching. I will be doing my live stream at a different time. So I've not yet done a box break for June. I'm not sure what night I will do it, but I will probably do it Friday night. I am not going to be available either Wednesday or Thursday. So this will be the first week in a long time that I've not done my either Wednesday or Thursday live stream. Even the week where I had my appendix out, I did my weekly live stream on Wednesday or Thursday. But I'll probably be live Thursday night, Friday the 30th. And I'll probably be doing not just a normal weekly live stream. I'll be doing my box breaks or pack break stream for the month, because I've not yet done that for June. So I will have Paldea Evolved. I will have Scarlet and Violet. I will schedule that with a couple days notice. But yeah, no regular live stream on Wednesday or Thursday. It'll likely be Friday night instead. I appreciate all you guys watching. I will catch you all later.